Hello everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 and welcome to another edition of the Flash Season 8 review series. And today I am going to be talking about episode 10, Reckless, which I have just finished watching. And this episode, by and large, was actually pretty good. I quite enjoyed this one a lot. And we kind of got a hint at who the mysterious Black Flame could be. And if it is who I think it is, it's going to be very interesting to see how this is actually going to work and play out. But we'll talk about that in a moment. But I thought, as I said, this episode by and large was pretty good. The only takeaway from this episode I would have to say is there just wasn't enough of Barry Allen. I mean, yes, he was there. He was doing his Flash thing. But I just feel that there just wasn't enough of the Flash because we didn't really get to see him a lot in costume doing his thing. And at times it felt like the Flash was taking a back seat to his own show. Now, I've talked about this many times in the past. You know, I feel that the Flash is more or less always taking a back seat to other characters. You know, I understand and respect that you want to give the other characters a chance to shine, which is good. I'm all for that. But at the same time, I feel like at times their stories seem to get overshadow the Flash's, because last time I checked, this is the Flash's show, not someone else's. I'm not going to go on about that too much, but at the same time, you know, this was actually a good episode, as we're more or less building up to the story arc of this mysterious Black Flame that's going around causing all sorts of trouble. Now, initially, at first, I thought this was just going to be like a throwaway thing and they'll move on to something else, but it looks like they are building up to something quite big. So I'm curious to see how this will play out, but I'll talk about a bit later on about how the reveal of who I think it could be could play out in the next episodes, but we'll get to that in a moment. So I'm going to give a quick recap of what's happened so far, and then we're going to get straight into talking about episode 10. So we saw in the last episode, we saw Team Flash having to deal with this mysterious Black Flame / Phantom going around killing people. And we understand that this mysterious Black Flame feeds on people's grief and emotions, kind of similar to what Darkseid did in Smallville Season 10. And we see that Iris is still experiencing these weird things that are going on with her, that making objects disappear around her. Now, this was first hinted a few episodes back where Nora and Bart Allen, where they were constantly messing around with the timeline, and eventually they fixed it. And that was the first sign we saw of this supposed, what looks like time sickness of sorts with Iris, where she touches things and things just disappear. This kind of plays into this episode. But that's more or less what happened in episode 9. But as I said, this episode, pretty good. And I'm interested to see how they're going to pull off this Black Flame story arc. So with that all said, let's get straight into it. Let's talk about episode 10, Reckless. So this episode opens up with Coast City, where we see Dion and Iris talk about her time sickness. And he reveals to her that it's not a virus that she has. It's actually the source of the sickness. Iris sends a distress call and summons Barry to Coast City and fills him in on what's going on. Dion says that Iris will need to stay put for the time being to attempt to destabilize her. He also does something to her that is very painful but should help. Iris sends Barry back home to Central City, and we see in Central City Frost works on her art and notices that she starts to sweat, which is quite rare because for a person who's supposed to be off cold, she never sweats, so this comes as quite a shock to her. And we see the Black Flame appears in her apartment and burns her arm, which is also quite shocking because, again, she's supposed to be a woman of ice. Barry feels in Team Flash about Iris's condition, and Cecile and Joe offer updates on their Black Flame investigation, but there's not much to work from. They then get a notification that someone is at Star Labs, and they find out it's Frost, and the attack on her doesn't fit the pattern, so they surmise that they can figure out why Black Flame would want to kill Frost. They might be able to figure out more about who this villain is. Frost goes to visit her mum, and she wants her help in using herself as bait to catch the Black Flame. Frost's mum thinks Black Flame is hunting Frost because her powers are cryokinetic. Barry doesn't like the idea of using Frost as bait and putting her in harm's way, but Chester already has a device to use to capture the Black Flame when it attacks. Barry rejects the plan, but Frost pleads her case and persuades him. The plan begins, and sure enough, the Black Flame shows up, but it seems to know what the team is planning, and instead of being captured, it attacks Frost when she tries to lure it in further. Frost survives and is unhurt, but the Black Flame has vanished again. Frost wants to try again, but Caitlin is having none of it, and in Coast City, Iris pays a visit to the adoption agency regarding Tina, but can't get the necessary information. We see Sue Dearborn leverages her contact and calls the chairman of the agency's board and gets the file unlocked. However, after Iris, Sue, and Tina leave, the receptionist comes out from getting coffee and finds the office dramatically changed. Iris and Tina talk. Tina is nervous about finding her birth mother, and Iris tells a bit about her own story about her absent mother. Now, this little story arc going on here with Iris and Sue and this Tina, I mean, it's okay, but I just don't really feel it adds a lot to the main story arc, in my opinion. I just feel like this is kind of just wasting time for the sake of it, but that's just me. Caitlin lectures both Frost and her mother about the plan and begs Frost to value her own life. However, Frost is determined to stop Black Flame, and Caitlin tells Carla that if something happens to Frost, she will effectively lose both daughters. Joe and Barry have a heart-to-heart about the situation. Carla goes to talk to Frost and gives her a mum talk and convinces her that she needs to prioritise her safety. Carla has a plan and reveals that she has the potential for cryokinetic powers and thus a cryokinetic signature. Frost and Carla are going to work together. The Black Flame shows up in the city again, and Team Flash engages the new plan. Carla activates her powers, the lure works, and Black Flame shows up. The containment device begins to work, but the sphere starts to lose its integrity as Carla starts to have a minor heart attack but refuses to stop. Frost then jumps up and stops Carla and saves her. The Black Flame escapes, and Team Flash comes together later to revamp the plan. In Coast City, Iris and Sue go with Tina to meet her birth mother, Renee Oiseau. Tina sits down with her and asks why Renee didn't want her, and Renee says she always wanted her, but she was so young, and that her parents convinced her to give her away, and that her parents were wrong. Renee said the only thing that got her through was to hope that Tina had a better life, but Tina tells her that she didn't. And then, midway through conversation, we see Iris starts to have another episode, and when Renee goes to help her, Iris touches her, and Renee is wiped out of existence. Wow. That's just insane, because by this point, we've more or less seen objects disappear. We've never actually seen people disappear until now, so this makes things not only very interesting, but very dangerous. So, kind of curious to see where that part of the story goes. I mean, Iris being the reporter citizen sort of thing doesn't really appeal to me that much, but this strange episode that's going on with Iris, it's piqued my interest enough. I'm want to see more of how that's going to unfold. And as we're brought to the end of the episode, we see Caitlin is at home in her apartment, and the lights start to flicker, and we see the appearance of Black Flame. But instead of attacking her, it starts to speak to her, and it sounds like it could be Ronnie Raymond. Now, for those of you who remember Ronnie Raymond, she was the fiance of Caitlin, and he died, or appeared to have died, in the particle accelerator back in season 1. But it turned out not to be the case. He returned as Firestorm. And then later on in season 2, we saw Ronnie return as an alternate version of Firestorm. who is working with Zoom alongside an alternate Killer Frost. So, is it possible that the Black Flame is Ronnie, or could it be the fact that the Black Flame is playing on Caitlyn's grief for her late fiance? Because we do remember that the Black Flame plays on people's emotions at times of grief. So maybe the Black Flame has tapped into a deep part of Caitlyn and is pretending to be Ronnie to lure her into a trap. But interesting way to close this episode, I think. And that's going to wrap up my review for season 10, and that wraps up this episode. Overall, I thought this was by and large pretty good. The Iris reporter stuff I didn't care much for, but her touching objects and now touching people as they disappear out of existence, I thought that was quite interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing how that's going to play out. And this Black Flame story arc is a bit different to what we've seen in past seasons, but I'm curious to see how that's going to play out, really. But by and large, I thought this was not a bad episode. Not terrible, but not great either. But at the same time, it was enjoyable. There was a few things going on in this episode that was enough for me to get me invested. So that's going to be it for me. I'm going to wrap this up now. What did you think of episode 10? Did you enjoy it? What was your thoughts on Iris touching people as they disappear out of existence? How do you think that's going to play out? Do you think there's a possibility of reversing the effects? And also, will it be revealed that how exactly Iris started getting these weird episodes? And also, what about the ending? What did you think of the Black Flame appearing in Caitlyn's apartment? Could it actually be Ronnie Raymond? Or could it be the Black Flame playing on Caitlyn's grief for her late fiance? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below. And I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Flash Season 8 review series, where I am going to be talking about episode 11, which I am very much looking forward to talking about, especially with the way this episode ended. Should be a good one, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how this Black Flame story arc is going to play out, and whether or not it is actually Ronnie Raymond. And also Iris experiencing weird episodes as she's now starting to make people disappear has also piqued my interest too, so we'll see. So until next time, take care everybody and stay safe, and once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.